had an interesting case this week where I had a request to emulate a 500 series latex printer with a 1500 and a 3200 industrial latex printers. And they've had a lot of success with adhesive vinyl, with banner, with front lit films. But they were trying to do it with fabric, and when they went into the workflow on the 500, it said NA. Let me explain how this works. When you load a fabric into a 500 series, or for that matter, a 300 series, and you have the ink collectors in, because the fabric is porous. Now keep in mind, you only have to put the ink collectors in if the fabric is porous. If the fabric is coated or airtight, you do not need to apply the ink collectors. But if the fabric is porous, you do. So if you have the ink collectors in, and you've chosen textile as your category, the color calibration and the ICC will both be listed as NA, or not applicable or not available. What we're saying is once you put that in, color calibration of the onboard I1 is not available because we do not believe it's going to be reliable or accurate enough to read that application. Also, even if you have the platen, the ink collectors out and have the flat platen in, and you were to choose uncoated textile, it will also say NA in both cases for the same reason. It assumes that if you're running an uncoated textile, an uncoated fabric, the I1's reliability would be called into question, and even if we allowed you to read it, the readings wouldn't be valid or wouldn't be consistent. That's why when you choose that category, it locks you out. That means that it is difficult to do a calibration using the onboard system on the 500 where you're going to use it to emulate for the 1500 or the 3000, because you can't do the color calibration on board. You would have to do it in the RIP. It would have to be done in Onyx or in Caldera. You'd have to remember your density settings, and then over time you would adjust your density for each ink channel accordingly so that you match what you did on day one when you built the preset. I'm going to explain a little workaround. In some cases, certain fabrics that are airtight, or fabrics that are coated, or even some high-quality uncoated fabrics, I have used a workflow where I tell the fabric, you are not a textile, you are not an uncoated textile, you are an adhesive vinyl backlit, or you are a vivid PVC banner. In those cases, I'm permitted to use the onboard color calibration, higher ink densities. Let me give you an example. A canvas, and I want to put more than 120% density down. Now, in the normal channel where you would build a preset for canvas, you would choose coated textile and canvas. But it's only going to allow you to print up to 120% density at 12 pass. Well, if I feel that my canvas would benefit from 130% density or 150% density, I can't choose that category. In my case, I will call it a vivid PVC banner. Canvas will perform a lot like banner anyway. Now, you can call a media a different category. You have to remember two things. One, where you put it. And second, you have to remember that the settings for that category are a little different. You may have a different vacuum setting. The cutter may be on or off. You may have some different settings with your starting print speeds and or temperatures. But you can adjust those. What I'm saying is it's possible to call a canvas banner, make some adjustments in the settings, like I would turn up the optimizer generally, and then choose a vivid mode or a backlit mode, and it may permit you to use the onboard I1 calibration as well as even the ICC. For me, I generally call canvas that I want to go over 120%, provided that's necessary, and you can judge that based upon the individual canvas this and then look at the analysis and determine is the color gamut getting affected or not. But if there is value to going to 130 or 150% density on a canvas, and I think there is, then I would choose a different path rather than the the coated textile and canvas under textile, and I would call it a banner, call it vivid banner, because that's going to give me 130 and 150 and 170 as, and it's going to use the onboard color calibration, and then once I do that on a regular basis, consistent color. There's advantages there. Now I'm going to turn the optimizer up, and more importantly, I may need to slow it down. 12 pass may not be ideal. I might have to go to 16 pass, or I might do 12 pass with significant interpass delays. But I prefer that workspace and that category choice. I want to use the onboard color calibration. It's important to use that so that I can maintain color consistency. Now, on some irregular canvases, especially matte canvases or have a lot of calendar surface, the onboard I1 could struggle reading because of the irregular surface. There is a point where the onboard I1, the distance it is and the way it's built, isn't going to be ideal. And that's why, for example, we chose to block that out and make it not available in those fabric settings, because we didn't feel that it would be effective. It would either read easily or it would just try and fail. If it tries to read it and it can't, and it's, it says was unable to read, or it doesn't go from generic to custom, it doesn't go from recommended to okay, it may mean that it can't see it, or the readings that it's getting are irrational, and so therefore it throws it out. But I have used both the SAV and the PVC banner for fabrics and canvases where I do wish to use the onboard color calibration at a minimum. Now, I may go into Caldera or Onyx or Flexi and build my ICC profile, but I do like to do, if I can, the onboard closed loop calibration, because that allows me to maintain consistent color, and that would also allow me to benefit from doing emulations from a 500 series to the larger industrial latex printers. It really depends on the fabric. Some of them actually work quite well, especially coated fabrics, and I want to put more ink on them than 120% in most cases for coated fabrics, so I tend to call them either a banner and change the settings, or I call them a backlit SAV and I change the settings. But please, you got to change the settings. In both of those cases, you will have to put the flat platen on. You cannot ever use the ink collectors, because that automatically triggers the printer to say, you're printing on porous material and we can't read it. So if you put the ink collectors in, it's no. But if you put the flat platens in and then call it adhesive vinyl, or call it, I'll sometimes use vivid banner for certain coated fabrics, print at 150% instead of 120, and I benefit from having the closed loop calibration available, which most of the time on a coated fabric will work just fine. Just some workarounds that I wanted to explain. Hopefully it wasn't too complicated, but to explain how the 500 works, how the different categories that we build things in work, and then a workaround that can be effective, but you're going to have to look at the fabric and evaluate it individually to determine if that fabric has reliability using the onboard I1. If it does, I do like to tend to use it. I think it's a great tool, and it allows me to record the densities for color calibration, closed loop calibration, and then also to emulate with the larger printers. But even as a standalone, I think it has a lot of value.